I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried about it. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Just another struggling writer. The Beleaguered Authors one-stop shop for commiseration and hopefully inspiration. My name is Carrie Scher, and I am just another struggling writer. And friends, the struggle has been really real this week. Today is actually Monday, and as I have mentioned a few times, I try to start my writing vlogs on Thursday, so I'm a little behind, and the reason for that is I have been majorly blocked. And you might be wondering, how can I possibly get blocked when I'm not even drafting yet? I am only on the outline. Well, I arrived at a scene that I thought was pretty pivotal because it introduces a major character and starts my main character down on a path that kind of shapes the rest of the novel. So pretty important. And I thought that I really just needed to get it right, and it was a real struggle. But the truth is, what was really holding me back from outlining the scene was the fact that I had introduced in a previous scene a question, and the question nicely set up that subplot for the rest of the book. But unfortunately, that question also created a ripple effect where I couldn't figure out how my main character would move forward while this question was still in her mind and do the things that the plot and the other characters were asking of her while she still was thinking about this question. I didn't want to go back and remove the question from the previous scene because, like I said, it is a nice way to get that plot started. So I needed to figure out how to ease some of the doubts that the question created in my main character's mind so that she could move forward. Because at that moment I was paralyzed with, it doesn't make sense that she would continue on this path while she still has these doubts and this question. And it took me like 3 or 4 days to really figure out how I was going to resolve that. I started thinking about it like Tuesday or Wednesday of last week, and it wasn't until like Friday night or Saturday that I got an idea. And as has happened a couple of times throughout this process, I wasn't completely in love with the idea. I wasn't totally sold that it was the right one. And so I slept on it, and then I slept on it again. And finally, I came to the conclusion today that there is not going to be another aha moment for me where something better presents itself, at least not in this moment. Maybe when I'm in the weeds of the draft, something will crop up and I'll be like, oh, this is way better than doing it this way. But for now, in order to move forward, I have to go with the only option I have. And it's not a bad one, not really. It's just that I was hoping for the magical light bulb moment and it never came. But fortunately, once I moved past that particular roadblock, the words were just pouring out of me. Prior to today, the most scenes I had outlined in a day was 6. Today I did 8. Answered that question for my main character kind of in a satisfactory way where she could move on and I could move on. And then I just went boom, 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 boom. After that, it was so easy to just continue with the flow, which is not to say that I was just going off of my previous outline and then just doing the detailed one. There were changes I was making. There were thoughts and new ideas coming up that required my attention. It was just, I was feeling really motivated. Like I had a creative backup from being blocked. And once that dam was removed, it was like whoosh. So I ended up adding a new scene that wasn't in the first or second draft of the outline, and I ended up completely changing one, removing the old version and adding something brand new in its place. And I'm feeling really good about what I have and really strong about the flow of events. And now Act 2 does truly feel complete. Up until this point, Act 2 still felt really thin and really like it was missing something. And I think the way that I have now described the sequence of events in this detailed outline, it feels a lot stronger. So that is already a win. And then as I am getting closer towards the midpoint, what I'm hoping is that as I continue to think about the progression of each individual scene, what sort of conversations and what thought processes are going into these scenes, I'm hoping that more ideas will spring up to fill out the fourth act, which is also still a little bit thin. It's very action heavy. I'm just worried that it's not dense enough just yet. I'm hoping as I get into that fourth act of this outline, something similar will happen and I'll be like, oh, I can add a scene here, or I can do this here, and it'll flesh out. The block sucked. I was really, really feeling frustrated about it. And like there were moments where I thought that I needed to go back and scrap the whole idea and just go back to the original plan. There were times where I was like, I just need to throw the whole outline away and just start completely brand new from the scene by scene breakdown. I didn't want to do that either. But now having moved past it, I'm back to feeling excited about what I'm doing, what I'm accomplishing, and getting ready for the draft. I still don't think it'll be this week, or maybe it'll be towards the end of the week, and then I'll take a couple of days off, and then the next vlog after that will be starting the draft. So still aiming for mid-September. I'm hoping tomorrow to finish outlining Act 3 at least. I'm hoping tomorrow to finish outlining Act 3 and getting into Act 4. And then by Wednesday, maybe finishing out this detailed outline. Now, who knows if that's going to be the case. I'm kind of eyeballing Friday as the day I want to be totally finished. We'll just have to see how it goes. But that is my update. Sorry it is so long in coming. So it means this vlog will probably be pretty short with only a couple of days of updates. But that is just writing sometimes. Sometimes sometimes there are ebbs and flows in your creative like synapses firing, because it felt like the last several days up until Saturday, so from like Wednesday to Saturday, I just had no ideas. Like I was completely dry. And a lot of that is, yes, feeling burnt out from work. The end of the month, as I have said numerous times, is my busiest time at work. And so I was coming home and feeling so fried that I could barely even think about it. One of my tricks that I use to stimulate ideas is to lay down and pretend I'm going to sleep, because I, like many other writers, get my most genius ideas as I'm about to go to sleep. And even that wasn't working. I was just sleeping. Even though it would be like 6 o'clock in the evening, I would just go to sleep and then wake up and be like, oh shit. So it's a new month. I'm feeling better. I've moved on. I am moving forward, and I look forward to finishing out this phase of the outline really strong. So I will check in with you tomorrow to let you know how much more progress I've made. Hey y'all, it is now Wednesday evening, and I am just checking in with a quick writing update. As you know, I have been working on a final detailed outline for Seekers of Empyrean, which I hope to take into the draft. But unfortunately, today was not as productive as yesterday was. And in fact, I'm feeling a little down about it. Not about my productivity, but about this outline and my chances of success going into the draft in general. And I feel like I go through this cycle every other week where I find my anxiety brain finds something new to complain about. And this week it still feels so thin. It's so thin. I got to the midpoint today, and so I stopped and kind of tallied up my estimated word count, and I'm only projected at about 80,000, so I'm about 10,000 short. But that's assuming that the last half is just as dense as the first half, and I'm not convinced that it is. It is much shorter on scenes, in fact about 6 short. And while, yes, you've got the climax in there, which will obviously chew up a lot of words, I just worry that there's just not enough in it. But with the way that I've constructed the plot, I don't know what else I could add without just dragging it down and making it so slow and unnecessarily dry. I feel like I still have some work to do, and to be fair, as I have been doing this detailed outline, new ideas have been generated. I've added one scene to the first half of the book that didn't fucking need it, but anyway. And I am hoping that as I progress into Act 4, which is currently the thinnest, I'll get more and more and more ideas, and I can flesh it out a little bit. But my fear is just that there's just not much left to be said there, which then cycles back to there's not much there to be said because I've done something wrong. I've constructed this plot incorrectly, and now I've left myself a gaping hole where we should be ramping up to the climax. So instead it's and so I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried about it. But there's really, what else can I do? What else can I do about it? I mean, I guess I could pause and take a moment and do some more brainstorming and thinking about what I've come up with so far to see if anything can fill out this second half. I guess I could do that. It just feels like such a block of momentum. But what else can you do? I don't want to be, I especially don't want to get to the 60% mark of the draft and realize that I only have 50,000 words and I still need 40 more to, make the draft okay. So I guess that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to pause. I'm going to have to press pause on this detailed outline and kind of do a comprehensive review of what I have so far and see if I can thicken up Act 4, which is so funny because like 2 weeks ago, Act 2 was the problem. And now Act 2 feels really solid and I'm back to thinking Act 4 has nothing. I think also part of my problem is, and I have noticed this a little bit on and off as I have been working through this outline process, that I think I am oscillating between being super rigidly structured, and by that I mean like you have to have 30 chapters and you have to have so many scenes in each act and they all have to be balanced and they all have to make sense according to the 6-act structure, wherein acts 1 through 4 are 20% each, and so you have to make sure the word I'm getting too like locked into the numbers and too much of that structure, and I think that's giving me some of the anxiety brain. And then I oscillate back down to fuck it, nothing matters anymore, just write it, which there is merit to that. And I guarantee you come to a point where I will take that advice. I'm not quite there yet. I do still want to see if there are answers to be had, but those two parts of my brain are fighting each other, and it's causing me to spiral. Simply put, right now the midpoint for me feels almost like a pre-climax, almost like a Dark Knight, but like a little bit further back. There is a lot of daylight between the Dark Knight, and the actual climax. I don't know if it quite feels like a midpoint. I do want it to be the midpoint because it does like change everything for my protagonist. But I also think if like some of the choices I've made for this Act 4 feels like a de-escalation rather than an escalation. Oh my gosh, is that the problem? Is all of Act 4 the problem? Because it is. It is a de-escalation. But is that de-escalation the problem? I'm gonna have to sleep on it. I'm gonna have to sleep on it and see if I have to completely rework and change everything about Act 4. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna sleep on it. Thanks for talking through it with me, even though I was the only one doing the talking. But those are the thinky thoughts that I'm having right now. That is what has been plaguing me all day. And it has kind of been a lingering doubt ever since that first outline was completed and I realized how like embarrassingly thin it was. And I thought I had fixed it by moving and shifting some things from Act 2 up to Act 4, but apparently not enough. All right, I'm going to go to bed and sleep on it and turn over some of these things in my mind and maybe hopefully come up with an answer. And I will check in with you tomorrow to let you know if I've made any progress or what I've decided to do. Hey y'all, checking in with the final writing update of this vlog, and it is a doozy. It is now Wednesday, quite late at night, and I have had a day of revelations. As I mentioned yesterday, I decided to sleep on my decision of what to do with my current iteration of the outline because I still feel like it fundamentally has flaws that I haven't adequately addressed yet. And I'm going to be honest, I avoided thinking about it for most of the day. And I think that's because I probably on some level already knew what needed to be done. Finally, close to the end of my workday, I arrived at a conclusion and set upon a course of action. And the conclusion was that the midpoint that has always been the midpoint that I have always built up in my head as the moment everything starts building up to the climax, what I had been up until this point thinking of as the mid-season climax, the mid-season finale, like if you were still thinking of this as a Monster of the Week type TV show, is not really the midpoint. It is a major moment that leads to the dark night of the soul, which in turn, of course, leads up to the climax. It is not meant to reside at the 50% mark. It is supposed to be a little bit closer to the 60% mark. The reason I came to that conclusion was because there really truly was nothing more I could add to the fourth act. Nothing more I could do to fill it out and make it chunkier without making it pointless filler. It had reached its capacity for filling out word counts and story and whatnot. And if I tried to do any more, it was going to be pretty flagrantly obvious that I just didn't know what to do in that section. And so by readjusting my perception of the timeline of events and thinking of that midpoint scene more like the 60% mark scene, the end of Act 3, rather than the middle of it, I got a whole new perspective on the outline and on the story I was telling as a whole. And what I came up with was, yes, by reconsidering that scene to be at a later point in the story, I resolved my issues with Act 4. But that does mean that everything I had crammed into the earlier part, the pre-50% part, what I had thought of as the 50% part, was not nearly interesting or exciting enough to carry 40% of the book. Because Act 1 is set in stone. Not changing anything about Act 1, but from 20% to 60%, that sequence of events was just not interesting enough. I had some moments that were interesting, but they, in the current iteration of the outline, they were not given the proper build up or reflection afterwards. They were just moments. So what I have decided to do is stop what I am doing with this current iteration of the outline and take a step back, like a literal step back in my process, and reconfigure once again my scene by scene outline. That's the color coded version where I'm just numbering them all out and doing the order of operations. And also going back to my very first draft of this outline, Path A that I have mentioned a couple times, and merge it to Path B, probably as it was always meant to be, if we're all going to be honest, and take both versions, merge them together, because now it makes a little bit more sense to do it that way, knowing that the midpoint is now the 60% mark. Now that moment and all the fallout from that moment is taking up all the oxygen in Act 4. And so there was no time to give Path B any of the screen time that I had originally allotted for it. So go back to the original Path A, where the plots are being introduced and built up, and not necessarily resolved, but at least give the characters some added depth and motivation and something else to be thinking about other than the main plot, and introduce those earlier in the story, and again, not necessarily resolve them, but set them up earlier. This doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'm very tired because what I have been doing is I have been redoing that scene by scene breakdown for a third time. And yes, I can already feel it lingering at the back of my mind. You could do this forever. You could constantly revise forever. But I really do think that this is the one. And the reason for that is I have done a preliminary kind of count and estimated the amount of scenes and where the 6-act structure breaks down. And it has tentatively evened all out. In the first iteration of the scene by scene breakdown, it was very bottom heavy, where the beginning of the book was very dense. And even after shifting some things to the latter half, the fourth act was still just so thin and just had really nothing to it, really nothing to build up, wasn't really truly building up to a climax. So I was basically getting to a midpoint, but only having 35% of the story left to tell at my midpoint. And so now doing what I've already outlined the first 20 scenes. So I'm because the first 13 or so were identical. Those aren't changing. The first Act 1 for sure and the first part of Act 2 aren't changing at all. Those are set in stone. It was just adding in some plots and some scenes, reconfiguring, reshaping it, taking what I learned from my detailed outline and adding that in. So I am tentatively on a much more even keel where it makes way more sense. I think once I finish this scene by scene breakdown, hopefully tomorrow. I've already done the first half because now with this new configuration, I've added 5 scenes. So I'm up to 41 and there could be more. Just I'm taking a break now at this moment that I'm at specifically because I need to sleep on it. I've had a question lingering at the back of my mind for the last week or so over a particular moment and whether or not it makes sense. And so I have to sleep on it because it is a darling. And if it needs to be cut, I'd rather cut it now rather than get into the draft and realize it needs to be cut. But anyway, so I'm going to sleep on that. But there is still potential for more reconfiguration of the last half, but I feel like I am now at the true midpoint in this scene by scene breakdown. I feel truly like I am finally on the correct path. And I'm sure I've said something similar the last couple of times, but this will resolve the pacing issue way more than anything I have done thus far. And like I said, the first 13 scenes I can keep because they're identical. So I'm really only backtracking 50% instead of 100. I'm starting completely from scratch. So it's not like all of the work that I've done thus far is wasted. It's not. So that's what I'm going to do. In a way, it's a relief to know that I finally figured out the key to unlocking this pacing problem. But it did take some letting go of some preconceived notions about my story. I'm someone who, when I conceive of an idea, I have a couple of key moments that are with me from the beginning of an idea that I use to kind of establish my plot. Like when I think of the overarching plot, way back at a 30,000 foot view, I have a couple of scenes and moments that I know are going in the book. That midpoint was one of them. And it's not going away. It's just no longer the midpoint. And to be honest with you, I've been kind of wondering that. A little voice at the back of my head has been saying, this might not be the midpoint that you're thinking it is. Since I started the detailed outline, actually probably even farther back from that, ever since I realized Act 4 was still too thin. And I kept trying to configure it to be well, maybe if I just do this, then it'll work. Anyway, this other scene that I have to think about tonight is another darling. Is another one that's been with me since the beginning. What I'm trying to tell myself is, yes, it is a little bit frustrating and it is a little bit worrisome that I keep backtracking and revising this outline. But the way I'm trying to look at it is that this could be the 4th draft that I'm doing, not just the 4th outline. And it's only taken me, a month and 5 days to get to this point. And again, that's not all wasted. That's tons of progress. If I can finish the scene by scene breakdown tomorrow and get back on track with my worksheets, I'm still okay to start drafting by mid-month. Yeah, I'm just trying to be grateful that I'm catching this now rather than in the middle of the draft. That was the result of sleeping on it and thinking about it subconsciously, because I definitely was avoiding it consciously. And then I was doing something completely mundane at work and I just knew that was the case. And I came home and I was counting scenes and moving things around. I was flipping back and forth between the 2 iterations of the scene breakdown and slotting things in and counting and going, yeah, that makes sense. Yep. That'll add this, that, and the other. And that'll mean that Act 2 now is an accurate 20% and Act 3 is now an accurate 20% and Act 4 is pretty damn close. When my cat wants out of my bedroom and I'm in the middle of filming, she will pull open one of my drawers on my chest of drawers and start pulling my laundry out and just leaving it on the floor. She doesn't want to do anything with my laundry. She doesn't want to do anything with the drawers. She just knows it'll prompt me to action. Anyway, so I'm going to go let her out and then I'm going to get in bed because I have done a lot. I've done a lot of scene work with my scene by scene breakdown, and tomorrow I'll get back to it. Thank you so much for watching and bearing witness to this maddening process that I seem to have developed. And thank you for all your kind comments and encouragement. It has been really nice to receive all that, especially in moments like yesterday and a little bit today where I was feeling really down on myself and this project. So thank you so much for watching. I so appreciate it. If you like my content and want to support the channel, please consider liking and subscribing. In my next video, I will have a reading vlog for you and it is going pretty well so far. So I hope you look forward to it and I will see you then. Bye. Bean.